America has been falling. We've incorporated globalist principles into our political and economic philosophy, our cultural norms, and much of our religious doctrine. The pace of decline is set to accelerate. Can America be restored as the land of the free and the home of the brave? An awakening may be in the brew. Americans are becoming sensitized to reality. That reality includes bedded unemployment. Our children's values are being inculcated through the community. And we live with a currency that offers no future protection of our economic and social well-being. Our government cannot be trusted as it spends us into financial oblivion as our leaders are uncommitted to the principles of America's founding. The roots of our current problems are not of recent vintage. They have been brewing for a century or more. Today, America is being equalized within a world system of human subjugation. The globalist dynamic is being delivered to us from all perspectives and all points along the political spectrum. Mankind's greatest challenge is right before us. As the human spirit rises, and as we understand and recognize our misdirection, we can restore the American principles of liberty and individualism. Today, we are here to help identify that misdirection. The world is under fire. Political economic globalism is the root of the cause. The central principle of modern economic globalism is this: global governance abolishes private property and establishes public-private partnership in replacement. Under this system, you become chattel of ruling elite. The United Nations has made its position on land ownership very clear. They decreed at the Habitat Conference in 1976 that, quote, private land ownership is also a principal instrument of accumulation and concentration of wealth, and therefore contributes to social injustice. Public control of land use is therefore indispensable. Now, the principle of modern political globalism is this: that world or global governance necessitates the termination of the American Declaration of Independence. The policies brought by globalism include an emerged economic system based upon public-private economic partnership and international redistribution. This has brought us to the point in time where corporatism or fascism is now worldwide. The World Trade Organization, the World Bank, the Bank of International Settlements, multinational corporations and their World Trade Organizations, all of these globalist organizations carry out and coordinate the public-private partnership while implementing the United Nations call for the abolition of private property. The goal is to reduce American economics to global norms. Our federal tariff authority has been relinquished to the World Trade Organization. The dollar as a monetary unit has become tarnished and is now being subjected to destruction. This is all a result of Congress's relinquishment of its constitutional duty to operate an honest monetary system. The Federal Reserve operates a dishonest monetary system that is destined to crash. The crash is intended to be used to subjugate America to an anti-human globalist system of governance. A new economic system coupled with a new system of justice, both inherent in globalism's political component, will not recognize your natural right to life, liberty, or happiness. The modern political system, sponsored by the international organizations mentioned earlier, calls for an 85% reduction in human population. Let's look at this page from the Global Biodiversity Assessment Report. This is one of the 3 guiding documents for Agenda 21. It's 1,150 pages long. And on page 773, it states the false premise upon which Agenda 21 is based, and that is that population growth has exceeded the capacity of the biosphere. A leader of the Bureau of Interior's BLM department has told me that California has a carrying capacity of 5 million people. It's interesting that that's about 15% of today's California population. This page goes on to say that a reasonable estimate for an industrialized world society at the present material standard of living of North America would be 1 billion people. A new ethical and moral system is being established, as is evidenced on TV and in the movies, through increasing religious acceptance of nature as God, all in accordance with the directives put out by a central and organized earthly political force. The new ethical system is set out in mankind's new guiding philosophy as established in the 3rd book of Agenda 21, called the Earth Charter. Now, the Earth Charter includes a new legal framework, a social plan to advance the collective. It's called social justice, and is intended to replace America's unique system of equal justice. Today, in our schools, the principles of social justice are what is taught. Today, in our law schools, equal justice is never even mentioned. Today, our judges are largely proponents of social justice. This new system has destroyed the foundation of America. Also, the country is imploding financially. We are unlikely to genuinely improve. Our debt problem cannot be liquidated. Our political system is in shambles. Both parties are committed to globalism. Obama and Romney offer little choice in this regard. Globalists are in total control of Washington, D.C. Just think of Obama and Romama. It's just like Bush and Clinton. They are all committed to globalism through and through. The time to salvage prosperity's prospects is now. We must begin the cleanup of our political economics or lose out to tyranny. So let's view quickly the tactics of globalism. The first tactic is education for global citizenship. This is really the most distressing element of what's happening today. New global citizens, mobilizing a generation to inspire youth to become engaged as global citizens. It's all about sustainable global change. You say, well, this is bizarre enough. It can't be seriously taken by parents or policymakers in our state. Well, let's take a look at some of the supporters of new global citizens. American Express, Arizona State. There's quite a list of big players. Ernst & Young, I used to work for Ernst & Ernst. Big foundations, big corporations. There's a whole list that goes along with this of important people supporting the new global citizen routine in our schools. The second tactic of globalism is to monitor and control all human action. The looming RFID tagging, known as spy chips. If you want to know more about RFIDs, we've got an excellent book called Spy Chips. Smart meters and the smart grid. There are cameras everywhere when you walk down the city streets or stop at a stoplight. We've got GPS watching us from the sky. Smart water meters are coming soon. We are living in the era of the development of the all-seeing eye. And the third tactic of globalism is the land use program, comprised of smart growth and the Wildlands Project. Now this map, most of you have seen it, prepared by Dr. Michael Kaufman, who will be speaking next. And it's a very important map, as we all know, because it shows us the plan for the land use element of Agenda 21. For those who aren't familiar, the red is the Wildlands Project, for which there's to be no human habitation and no extraction of resources. This is why we don't tap our oil reserves in this country. It's why miners can no longer mine. It's why foresters everywhere can't cut their trees. You go to Montana today, half the trees are dead and standing. They can't be cut down. And smart growth, as we know, is the stacking and packing of human beings in densely populated urban areas. The One Bay Area plan typifies that for the entire country, as 9 counties come together under federal direction to create one community of stack and pack housing and public transportation. Fortunately, people in this room are taking tremendous effort, making great strides in bringing this fact to the public and nixing the entire One Bay Area move, which is the protocol for the rest of the United States. Now, I have described the principles, the policies, and the tactics for the globalist local action plan called Agenda 21, known locally as Sustainable Development. So what is Agenda 21? Well, in their own words, Agenda 21 is a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations systems, governments, and major groups in every area. That's a more profound statement than what might strike us. Operating in the United States today are over 10,000 NGOs, non-governmental organizations. NGOs like the Sierra Club, like the American Chamber of Commerce, like the National Real Estate Board, are all accredited by the UN for purposes of implementing Agenda 21. So when they say organizations of the United Nations system, and it's huge. So how did Agenda 21 come to the United States? Well, it was Republican George Bush who signed the protocol in 1992 while sitting at on Prince Charles's yacht docked offshore in Rio de Janeiro. A year later, President Clinton established the President's Council for Sustainable Development. In 1997, mayors created the Center for Sustainable Communities, and later the governors endorsed smart growth. Our political institutions are fully on board with the globalist remake of America's plan. The freedom movement has begun its breakout. I ask, is this our last chance? How much time is left before world governance is irreversible? Let's slip back to the beginning of this talk. The principles of globalism. Just to remind ourselves, first, the economic principle is that global governance abolishes private property and establishes public-private partnership in replacement. The political principle of globalism is this: world or global governance necessitates the termination of the American Declaration of Independence. So what are we fighting for? What are we fighting to protect? And what will we lose under globalism? Well, let's contrast the two major declarations that operate in the world today. One is, of course, the United States Declaration of Independence, and the other is the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. Well, the nature of the American experience is to protect the individual and his rights. The purpose of government is to protect the natural or unalienable rights of every individual. That all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Let's contrast that with the community rights, which are at the base of the UN Declaration of Human Rights. There, the purpose of government is to control the individual for the greater good of the community. Article 29, subsection C of that document actually says the following: rights and freedoms may be in no case exercised contrary to the purposes and principles as adopted from time to time by the United Nations. In other words, no rights are immutable. All rights are subject to the control of a ruling elite. Under the UN system, government grants, restricts, or withdraws your rights according to its needs. You and the product of your labor under this system belong to the community. Let's contrast that with the American system, where you're born with rights and government exists for one reason, and that is to protect those rights. How thoroughly Americans have forgotten that. Under the American system, in concept, you and the product of your labor belong to you. Now, the policies of Agenda 21 infest all of government, and I'm going to examine a few illustrations of that. First, let me say that both political parties, both the left and the right, have, within leadership, a full commitment to the Agenda 21 protocol. I like to illustrate it with the use of what I call the contemporary dialectic, bringing a global green cartel to America. On the left, we have the foot soldiers, the environmentalists, working to create a greener world. As I illustrated last night, they have no intention for a green world. They only have one intention, and that is to use the green movement to abolish private property, to assume complete control. But also coming from the left are the principles of social justice, the principles that are changing our entire legal framework in this country and are abandoning the principles that made America mankind's greatest achievement. But from the right, we get the business element. This is what the foot soldiers are marching to achieve. That is a multinational corporate oligarchy operating in true Benito Mussolini fashion as they control not just America, but all of the world. This is the system that has us in the deep fix, because this is the system that brings about the World Bank and the World Trade Organization and the rest of the internationalist organizations I referenced earlier. Now, some people think that all we need is a new election, and America's bygones, the problems will be bygone. Well, let's take a quote from the apparent Republican nominee. If you were to Google Mitt Romney plus sustainable development, you'd think he was on steroids compared to Barack Obama. Here's what Mitt Romney says about sustainable development. To improve our quality of life, it is important to coordinate state resources and implement new policies which encourage sustainable development. George Washington was right when he said that political parties would become a danger to this country. He remains the greatest president in our nation's history. Then there is the legislative branch's contributions to sustainable development. These are accelerating. I could go through a long list, but let's just look at a couple things quickly. Sustainable communities coming out of the federal government's, coming out of Congress. And of course, Californians AB 32 and SB 375. Now, sustainable communities strategy is the new, kinder, gentler wording for Agenda 21. AB 32 deals with global warming, climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, and related punitive and constricting initiatives. SB 375 deals with transportation planning, multimodal transportation, meaning that you get to walk, smart growth, and high-density housing. This is how sustainable development gets implemented in our communities. And as we all know, AB 375 is wreaking havoc on communities throughout this state. I've seen the plan for Orange County. You know, it's going to come close to rivaling the One Bay Area plan. The plans for climate action control in Santa Cruz, all in accordance with the SB 375, is horrendous. And if your county hasn't been hit with its public document, just expect it to happen soon, because all of California is rallying to the sustainable development demands right now. Next is the executive department. There was something I learned only last month or two. A gentleman in this audience brought me a document called the Emergency War Powers Act. How many people are familiar with the Emergency War Powers Act? Wow, that's great. Well, the Emergency War Powers Act was a congressional bill passed in 1917, which gave President Wilson some dictatorial powers in dealing with the enemy that might be here in the United States. Well, under the legislation, it is only the president who can revoke the War Powers Act. When World War I ended, Wilson didn't revoke it. When FDR became president in 1933, facing a bankruptcy and a lot of pressure from the international bankers at that time, he expanded the continuing Emergency War Powers Act so that it covered all citizens and all property in the United States. You did not have to be an enemy in order to be controlled by the executive department. And since then, the executive department has been putting out executive orders that have nothing to do with the running of the executive department, but have everything to do with running our lives. And they do that, they continue to do that, because guess what? Since FDR, no president has called the end of the Emergency War Powers Act. It still operates today. 95 years old, we've been in a state of emergency, vesting dictatorial powers in the presidency ever since. No president has revoked the Emergency War Powers Act. No wonder we're in the mess we're in. Next, I want to talk about COGs and MPOs. How many people know what a COG is? That number keeps going up in audiences. COG is a council of government. You are run by councils of government. Councils of government are federal agencies. They cover virtually every square inch of land in the United States. Everybody's subjected to a COG. Your city and your county can do very little business without permission from the COG. Our system of government doesn't work the way we were told it worked in the 8th grade. It is the COGs that control all regional, that's a new level of government in America. You know, regionalism is a Soviet system of government. Charlotte Iserbyt calls regionalism communism. We live with a regional system of government commanded by the COGs, councils of governments, and the MPOs, metropolitan planning organizations. It is the COG that brought the San Francisco Bay Area the One Bay Area plan. It is the COG bringing to Santa Cruz the Climate Action Plan. It is COGs bringing sustainable development everywhere COGS are even worse than that because COGS are led by ICLEI. So when you throw ICLEI out of your town, you've just hidden ICLEI behind the COG bush, because the COG requirements for your cities are all predicated upon Agenda 21 as delivered to them through the ICLEI organization. Now I want to talk about ICLEI itself. ICLEI is an international association of local governments that promote sustainable development. Think about that. ICLEI, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, headquartered in Bonn, Germany, with offices on every continent. On this continent, they are headquartered in Oakland. They moved from Berkeley to Oakland when Jerry Brown was mayor. So ICLEI's, I can't see that from here, but their purpose is to serve a worldwide movement to deliver sustainable environmental results to cities around the world. The head of ICLEI, one of the leading NGOs, authors of all kinds of sustainable program guidelines and guidebooks for local governments. But the head of ICLEI has said that the UN will someday become the United League of Cities under ICLEI's direction. 600 cities in America have contracts with this organization, contracts that directly violate Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution, which prohibits states and their subdivisions from engaging in any foreign political activities. There is nothing more foreign than the ICLEI organization. You need to kick it out of your cities, and then you need to get serious about the COGS, and that's where the real test of our capacity is going to be evidenced. Now, schools and churches are also a major problem with the Agenda 21 protocol today. A woman said up here not long ago, pull your kids out of school. Gee, you mean we can't salvage our schools? I second her. Pull your children out of school. And get your churches to stand up. So many of these mega churches are nothing but outposts for the new global order. We need to face that, realize that, and take our basic churches and get them back on the path. It was the preachers who brought the American people to their first revolution. And now, because everybody wants to save their tax deduction to a broken monetary system, you won't find priests and ministers say a word about the assault on America. If that assault succeeds, these preachers and ministers are going to have to start singing the Gaia tune. It is in everyone's interest that our churches begin to take a stance. And let's not forget the multinationals. These major corporations with their trade pacts. It was the corporations that brought our countries to these NAFTA and CAFTA trade pacts, which have destroyed our economy, turned us into a service economy with now a stagnant, permanent, high and underemployment rate that's vastly underestimated by our formal news reports. The purpose of these multinational corporations is to maximize their corporate profit growth at the expense of federal taxing revenue. American industry and jobs. The effect of multinational dynamic is to redistribute American wealth and eliminate American independence. And the final comment I'll make regarding the policies of Agenda 21 infesting government is in regard to the environmental movement itself. Using public-private partnerships, the Nature Conservancy has holdings of 119 million acres, the largest landowner in the world. Completely committed to sustainable development and to a one-world order, where private property has been abolished. Remember, public-private partnership is not private property. It just means you got to deal with the devil. You get to do business, but you're not private in any way. You're public, a private expression of a public purpose. And no landowner is protected from the ravages of social justice. Private property is being abolished under social justice principles, as I demonstrated as happening in my own situation last night. So, what does a citizen do? The first thing we all must do, we must spread this understanding, is to learn the tactics of Agenda 21. It is only by knowing those tactics that we can begin to counter them. Effective countering means to think locally. The global mission is a global to local transformation. You know, in Santa Cruz, when I first moved to town in 1984, there were all these bumper stickers. It said, think globally, act locally. Well, they are now acting locally. That's where we have to stand up. We cannot stop Washington, D.C. from doing what they're doing. We cannot terminate the United Nations or the World Trade Organization, but we can take control and have responsibility for our local government. It begins with our school boards. We've got to build from the bottom up. We need to get Agenda 21 policy out from where it is that you live. D.C. is truly lost for now. We got to recover our neighborhoods, our towns, and then our county. When enough counties in California have reformed themselves, then we can think about taking on Sacramento. Because Sacramento is as much of an abyss as is Washington, D.C. You know, around the country, I can tell you that there are legislators in other states who have this message, who are pushing this message forward. Oklahoma, Washington, Colorado. There are a number of states that are making some great strides. California is dead. You talk Agenda 21 up in Sacramento, nobody's going to pay any attention. We're in Sacramento. Nobody down the street pays attention. All the people down the street are implementing one side of the policies of Agenda 21 or another. We need new crops of legislators in this state, or this state is finished. So, as we counter global education, we need to do these things. We need to recover control of our local school board, and when we do that, we must kick out the federal mandates. No more federal control of education. We need to get rid of the federal curriculum in the state of California schools. We must take local control in California. When we do that, when we gain local control, we need to be wary of the State Department of Education. We need to infuse, when we get control of these schools, a healthy system of traditional American education. Begin where the revitalization matters most, and that is it where your children attend school. No one is going to swoop in and do it for us. Now is the time where it'll become too late. So, we need to understand also how ICLEI and your local COG play out in your area. If you don't understand this, I suggest you go to Freedom Advocates. My speech entitled The Ultimate War has a good 5-page section on COGs and regionalism. This is the key. Americans across the country have taken up the challenge of kicking ICLEI out. That's a good first start. But ICLEI comes right back into your town through the COG. If you don't get the COG out, we're in trouble. The problem with COGS is they come with all the federal money. We pay our taxes. It comes back to our communities as directed by the COG, implementing Agenda 21. This creates a real dilemma. What's the freedom movement going to do when we face up to the fact that these federal regional outfits are controlling us just like the people of the Soviet Union were controlled by the Kremlin? And if we kick the COG out, we lose all our federal money. So what is Siskiyou going to do when they bust their dams? Well, gee, if they condemn the dams first, take the dams over, they find that they're still in trouble because they're not going to get their federal return of tax funds because they're not playing the COGS game. It is going to turn out in this country that some community, one to begin with, more to follow, will kick the COG out of their town, out of their county. The federal government will respond and say, you just lost all your federal funding. What are the citizens going to do then? Will they continue to pay the federal government a tax to enslave them? The day is coming when local areas secede from the United States. Yes. And the reason to do that isn't to be a rebel. The reason to do that is so that enough of the American people say, enough with Washington, D.C., until you get back on the track our founders put you on, we're not part of your game. And when enough of us have seceded, the American country can be repatriated. Because it's only when a strong message is delivered to Washington, D.C., that we have any chance of reforming D.C. It has to happen in our homes, in our neighborhoods, in our school districts, before it can happen in D.C. So, this is what we must fight for. We must remember the American experiment is about the political recognition of every individual's unalienable rights. I'm missing my order. I have a PowerPoint here that I want to share with you. This regards ICLEI and how to kick ICLEI out of your town. This is a hearing before the Alameda County Board of Supervisors. I do business there. I've been harassed for the last 10 years by this board. And so having my fill and deciding that the appropriate thing to do from a public perspective was to deliver to the supervisors of Alameda County what's called a misprision of treason. Now, the misprision statute in this California, almost all states have a misprision statute, comes from 1850. It was a core idea at that time of how you kept your elected representatives responsible for sustaining and maintaining the Constitution. So a misprision of treason is a misdemeanor, and it is levied against public officials who do not take notice and take stance against unconstitutional activities. And I think it's very clear that contracts with ICLEI are unconstitutional. So this is a misprision of treason that I delivered in Alameda County. Let me just describe, I delivered to them a misprision of treason. I think we have the document over at the table. This is something if you were unsuccessful in getting your community to out the ICLEI organization, as Alameda is fully committed to ICLEI. You deliver a misprision of treason. It has no statute of limitations, so that when the citizens can regain control of a county, those people who oversaw the ICLEI connection in these years can be charged with treason. And I'll tell you, if I'm an elected official and I got to go to bed at night thinking there's a bunch of citizens in my community who know I'm doing the wrong thing and are committed for life to make that situation right, I don't sleep very well. And that's what these leaders who are contracting us with ICLEI need to be subjected to. So I encourage you, we've got this video at our website, and we've got the document at our table if you want to see how to misprision your elected officials. We'll get questions later. So if we're going to recapture the political recognition of unalienable rights, we need to remind ourselves and remind our elected officials that government exists to serve, not rule the populace, and that America was established to protect the notion that each of us is made in the image and likeness of God, and accordingly, we are vested with natural rights that must be protected by a system which recognizes natural law. Natural law is the notion outlined by John Locke that recognizes that man's law cannot supersede natural law, and thereby our individual freedoms are protected as we exercise freedom responsibly. Today, America is lost. America needs to be reconstructed from the family up. Parents need to raise children. Reconsider involving them in collectivist school systems which serve to twist their minds. Today's schools are creating global citizens, drones for the New World Order. Restore an American system of education at home. Raise your children with values and awareness. We need to restore a constitutional system of tariffs and excise taxes to reinvigorate an American economy and replace the personal taxes which contribute to the need for both parents to join the workforce. We need a constitutional system of taxation. We need to withdraw from the World Trade Organization and restore real jobs in America. Also, we must recognize that an honest monetary system is essential to a free society. The founders knew this and warned us. This is why we need to understand Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution. Today's fiat system rots our society. It affects our spirit, and it destroys the security of our future. In the end, a fiat system busts. Then what? Well, there's a plan for that. The plan includes world government and a massively reduced population. Now is the time to avoid the culmination of this plan. Now is when you need to recognize the grand threat to America and our posterity. The King of England was the most powerful political force through the Renaissance and into the 20th century. Our forefathers, by their own initiative and at their own risk, defied the king and created mankind's greatest political experiment, which resulted in a great human advance. That experiment was the political recognition of every individual's unalienable rights, including the right to life, to liberty, and the use and enjoyment of one's private property. Today, the job of restoring that political recognition is ours. If we shrink our health, our freedom, and our lives along with that of our posterity, will be captured by an all-seeing, technocratic, global, totalitarian regime that regards humans as chattel. Let me say that again. We are on the verge of being captured by an all-seeing, technocratic, global, totalitarian regime that regards humans as chattel. The time has come for you, me, and every other true American to know what it is that we must fight for and what it is that we are fighting against. It is time to come to the aid of our country. If we can reform the local school district, capture local water and fire boards, rid our cities and counties of Agenda 21 policy, ICLEI influence, and COG control, then America will be in the process of political restoration. This is what we need to do, and if we can do that, then we can ask God to bless America. Yes. Thank you.